Hello and welcome back to Change Wired podcast. My name is Angela Sharina. I'm your host, your executive leadership coach and partner in change and transformation. And I'm beyond excited today to bring you a conversation with Alex Osterwalder, the mind behind some of the most widely used business strategy and innovation tools in the world, like the business model canvas and value proposition canvas. You can even Google it or ChatGPT it, and you'll probably find at your fingertips. Most leaders and entrepreneurs guess their way through so much needed these days innovation. They fall in love with ideas, build too much too fast, and only later realize customers don't care about most of it. Alex has spent his career fixing this exact problem. He shows us how to design innovation like architects design buildings with blueprints, tools, and processes that turn vision into reality. In this episode, Alex shares how to avoid things like zombie projects. Those things that you start and never finish, which very often end up draining a lot of resources. From volleyball to strategy, how Alex's unlikely journey shaped his obsession with creating and simplifying tools for business and innovation. We're going to dive into that as well. Why business plans fail, why innovation plans fail, the origin of the business model canvas, and why structure and how structure beats guesswork every time. AI and innovation, we're going to talk about that, of course, as well. And Alex's view on how AI changes everything and nothing when it comes to fundamentals. We're going to talk about those fundamentals. Portfolio thinking, why great companies run many small bets, kill weak ones fast, and scale the winners. I think we should approach our life's innovations and change that way as well. We're going to talk about life's innovation as well. Systems, not slogans. Why excitement for innovation isn't enough. Innovation needs the right structures, incentives, and processes to thrive. And then we're going to end with personal success. Alex's reflection on what success means beyond growth and money, and why defining your own metrics of success is essential. If you ever wondered, how do I make innovation less of a gamble and more of a repeatable process, whether that's personal innovation, your company's innovation, or career innovation? If you ever wondered what's the role of AI in shaping strategy, innovation, execution today? How do companies stay relevant without burning people out with change and wasting a ton of money? Whether you are leading a Fortune 500 company, guys, or building a startup, Alex work with 500 companies and startups, or you simply reinventing yourself, this episode will give you practical insights and tools and strategies, and maybe even more courage to create the future instead of waiting for it. So grab your notebook, your hot beverage of choice, or maybe your headphones to get walking, and let's dive into this powerful conversation with Alex Osterwalder. Alex Osterwalder, welcome to Change Wired podcast. So glad to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm feeling super lucky to have an hour or so of your time, because I feel like you are one of the top best kept secrets in the business world, in the world of strategy and innovation, with all the work that you did with one of the top companies in the world, that also a lot of new ventures, and you wrote a lot of what I believe foundational books on business strategy, innovation strategy. Right, you are also a professor at one of the top business schools and a lot of other things. So very happy to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. I'd like to begin from somewhere very early on in your journey. Again, today you are one of the top thinkers in the world on business strategy and innovation strategy. But how did it all start? Like, if we were to go back to 8, 9 year old Alex, what did you dream about? Who did you want to be when you grow up? And yeah, let's start there.
Okay, well, that's far back. I just always liked, to create things, and it turns out that today I like creating businesses and help others create businesses or new innovations. So kind of that was the kernel. And I was not, into business as a small kid, but I was into creating stuff. And at the end of the
Mhm.
day, creating an innovation or a business is the same thing, right? It's an artifact, something you create. So kind of started there. Then maybe what a lot of people don't know is that my career ambitions were completely different. I wanted to be a professional beach volleyball player. That's kind of my
Oh,
only
wow.
after school. That was kind of my direction. I didn't make it, but my beach volleyball partner actually did. He went on to win a bronze medal at the Olympics, so it was fun to be there. So I was at least I
Oh.
got part of that, ambition by joining my friend watching at the Olympics in Athens.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing this twist in the history of Alex. Yeah, and from there, from that path, well, how did it end, and maybe how did you transition to a different one?
Well, the transition actually had to do with volleyball. So I went to the University of Lausanne, and I went because there was good beach volleyball there. Then I happened, I went to business school, got excited about that. Actually, then switched to political science. So
Mm.
that was an interesting one. Actually, they kind of kicked me out of business school because I wasn't good enough or not, it's too much on the beach volleyball court. Then went back to business school and did a PhD on the topic of business models. So that's kind of
Mm.
how the whole business model theme started. But again, why business models? Because it's that thing you create, is that the business model. I was interested, as a teenager and then later on in business, not necessarily entrepreneurship. In Switzerland, that wasn't really a thing. But what is business? How do you run businesses? How does this work? That was a theme kind of throughout, and then became a key theme when I started my PhD with Yves Pigneur, who became a good friend and co-author
Hmm.
over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I was also wondering how do you pronounce that name? Now you covered it
Yeah.
in your. Yeah, so you guys created again some of the foundational books now on business strategy, innovation strategy. So yeah, you mentioned that you started this PhD journey, but and you developed, quite a few tools into a like a quite an extensive piece of work. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what did you see in the business world that was lacking that you decided to dedicate that much
Yeah.
amount of your time and energy into developing these tools like business model canvas or value proposition
Yeah.
canvas?
Yeah. So that really started with Yves' idea. He had a lot of entrepreneurs from the, polytechnical school coming to him and, showing them a business plan. And business plans don't work in innovation and entrepreneurship. So he always kind of wondered, like, couldn't there be something more like architects, computer-aided design for architects,
Hmm.
where you can use the power of computers? And today with AI, that seems like a natural thing, but we started back then to ask, could we use the power of computing and structure to think through businesses? So
Hmm.
when you want to do that, you need to structure, what a business model is. So the
Yeah.
PhD was all about defining what a business model is. There were quite a few concepts out there. We weren't the first to talk about the topic, but then, with my dissertation, I was the first to kind of build a more rigorous model on which you could build software on top. And that was part of the prototype of my PhD.
Mm.
So that's how it all started. It was basically Eve's idea. Could we make a computer-aided design for business? And that was the starting point. Then later on, when we launched business model generation,
Hmm.
the ambition was really to put it out there because people were downloading, the PhD, reading it, like, wow, I didn't know PhDs were read by other people other than the dissertation
Yeah.
committee. And people were using the business model canvas that we put out there under a different name. It was called the Business Model Ontology. So
Hmm.
then when we did work on business model generation, we called it the business model canvas. And that's kind of when things took up on a different scale, that kind of curve, the hockey stick
Yeah.
curve. We definitely had that for business model canvas. And now millions, literally millions of people use it throughout the world, which is very fascinating to see. We would have never expected that.
Yes, and it sounds like, yeah, you didn't have exactly the plan to make business model like generation anthology canvas into your one of the core things that you'd be doing, right? So what were you doing at the time and how did that, like you mentioned, people started using that. Did you then, I don't know, develop some consultancy model or some business courses and programs? Like how did that journey go? And what were you
Yeah.
doing at that time as well?
Yeah.
Like what were your maybe plan B as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So I never have the plan. I actually always have a plan B, but always go for the plan A, however
Yeah.
risky. I think the motivation back then at the beginning was just to put something in people's hands that would help them do better work. And
Mhm.
that's definitely what we've seen with the business small canvas. Again, we were not the first to put a concept out there, but I think we just went a level further in simplicity, rigor, and that's why it got adopted. So a lot of people start to adopt this. We wrote the book Business Small Generation. Again,
Mhm.
we put a lot of emphasis on visual, simple, practical, because that's what we wanted. We basically
Yeah.
wrote a book that we would want. That took off. And then after, the bestseller, when, you have at the beginning thousands of copies, now millions of copies out there, you got to ask yourself, what do you want to do? Do you want to become a consultant or an advisor?
Mhm.
And I was always interested in software since that kind of came out of my PhD. Got interested a little bit more in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley or so. Didn't make the step to live there, to go there for a variety of
Mhm.
reasons. But we then went down the path of software with Strategyzer. And
Mhm.
not knowing anything, and then out of this kind of Swiss ecosystem, not Silicon Valley ecosystem, definitely made tons and tons of mistakes, but always kept, going and then creating new tools and always addressing the business challenges that we see unsolved. Because I'm just fascinated by trying to put tools into people's
Yeah.
hands so they can do a better job. So it's really driven by market needs. What are people struggling with? Can we help them with simple and practical tools?
Yes, it seems like such a common, I don't know, thing or common sense thing to do. But then at the same time, many, especially business owners, entrepreneurs at the beginning, fall in love with the idea first, like this is the product, before thinking a little bit more through this idea like, does anyone need it? Does anyone else struggle with that? Right. And I feel like also your second book, Value Proposition Canvas, addresses that as well, like figuring out, right? Is there a problem and how can we figure out like
Yeah.
what's the best solution? And
Yeah.
so
That
uh,
was a very concrete reason why we came up with that book. So people use the business model canvas to work on products rather than the business model. So we realized, well, maybe there's a need for another tool, one that
mhm,
zooms into one aspect of the business model. How am I creating value for customers with my value proposition?
mhm,
So that tool didn't come out of, oh, we want to create a tool. It came out of, why are people, using the business model canvas the wrong way? Well, because they have a challenge that is not solved the right way today, so they're using the wrong tool. But there is no
yeah,
other tool. So we created the value proposition canvas, which goes together with the business model canvas, right? Business model
mhm,
canvas is making explicit how you create, deliver, and capture value. And the
yeah,
value proposition canvas is, making explicit how you're creating value for customers. So it zooms in. You need both to
yeah,
make it succeed. And then you need the third piece, which is actually implementing your value proposition and business model. So when you get these three things right, which value
mhm.
propositions resonate with customers, which business models can scale, and how do you actually scale and run a business? It's a very hard part, probably the hardest. When you get those three right, you're able to build a successful business.
Yes, and I myself being on this solopreneur journey for quite a while, I can so relate that it's so much different to follow a process from when you just try to sort of shoot in the dark, hoping
Yes.
that something will stick. The
Yes.
process, even though it also might be slow and there might be failure and things might not work out, but with the good process, you are getting
Yes.
closer and closer to the solution.
Yes.
Whereas when you just
Yes.
shoot in the dark, right, it's like, well, you
Yes.
might be shooting for your
Yes.
entire life and never
Yeah.
hit
And that
anything.
was actually what you're saying is super important because that's what got us to pivot, towards the right kind of business model that's software based. We didn't get that one
Mm,
right for a very long time, but now we're kind of relaunching some of that with playbooks. And
mm-hmm.
playbooks is how do you apply these tools in the right way, step by step, with which process.
Yeah,
So, we put a lot of books out there so people learn. They still didn't do it right, even though we
yeah,
described the process, because it's not that easy. So just yesterday, my sales team, closed the deal, which was very interesting because the person said, the CEO of a small company, he said, this theory overload and, all this learning, because he's been a fan of our books for a very long time. But then we launched these playbooks, which
yeah,
is, on our software platform so that you can go step by step. Yes, you learn some things. How does this concept work? But then you apply them to get outcomes. Because at the end of the day, it's not about learning, it's not about process, it's about achieving those outcomes and those little wins until you get the right wins. And all of that is applying. So, there's, I think, a lot of kind of learning fatigue out there, process
mm-hmm.
fatigue, template fatigue. It's really about what do I need to do step by step. So that's why
Yeah,
we relaunched now with these playbooks and we're seeing a lot of success. Also, our playbooks were too big at the beginning, so we realized, hard for people to get in. When you really listen to customers, we haven't always done this well. We tell others to do it, but then, you got to do
yeah,
it yourself. Now we really, are getting a lot better at this in terms of listening. And it's very simple. When you listen, you will hear. It's not about asking people, what do you want? It's trying to figure out what are they trying to get done. You create, solutions
yeah,
for that, business model around it, and you'll succeed. So business
yeah,
at the end of the day, not that hard when you follow some basic principles. The hard thing is you don't get it right overnight. This is an experience journey. You need to do it again and again and again. You learn again and again and again. It's like becoming a doctor. You can read all the books. You won't be a good doctor. You won't be a
yeah.
surgeon. It's both hand in hand.
Yeah, it's probably why AI, it's going to be a long journey before AI can replace doctors, like with all the knowledge. And speaking of AI, I think what's sort of downside of AI is it gives the impression, that now you like know everything. And people would share with me also, like business owners, entrepreneurs that I know, like, oh, I have this strategy now. I know everything. Like, and sometimes I fall for that as
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
Like I have all the answers. Yeah.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So strategy is simple. Like business models, mapping out a business model, an idea that looks great is simple. So what AI is really good at, and a friend of mine told me that I said this, I didn't remember. With AI, you start from a place of edit. It helps you make very quick prototypes.
Hmm.
For example, a strategy, for example, a business model, for example, a value proposition. But then you need to iterate, and you can iterate, with the help of AI. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be what do customers really care about? AI will not tell you straightforward
Yeah.
what it is. It'll get better at it. And AI will not tell you on its own how to run a company. It'll give you aspects of it, but it's by actually getting the real feedback from real people. Will it change the way we manage companies? For sure. So that's an exciting kind of
Hmm.
thing that's going to happen. But I do believe for quite some time it's going to be a co-pilot.
Yeah.
So, it's a bit scary because sometimes the answers look so great. But then when you run a company, you know that those things are the easy things. Adapting those things to the real world with real people, that's the hard part. But we'll see where AI brings us. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
unknowns.
Yeah, I read somewhere the phrase, I think one of your newsletters, that AI changed everything and nothing. Can you also maybe explain a little bit more on that? Like, especially in your work of business and innovation
Yeah.
strategy, where do you see like, yeah, it's changed a lot of things, but also didn't in your work and company, how companies do things?
So,
group.
so
Yeah.
where it changes everything. So if I just take innovation or strategy, in terms of
Yeah.
process, is so much faster, right? The ideation, you'll get 500 ideas rather than five. So it'll just boost the thing, right? You can make a prototype within seconds. So, we used to use this tool called value scenes where you draw how you create value for
Hmm.
customers. You do it with your hand or with stick figures, and then you'd hire maybe a designer to make it look better so you can put it in front of real people. This
Yeah.
today, you do with AI, you got the image within seconds. Yeah, it still takes minutes when we're talking about
Yeah.
images, but that's super powerful. So it changes everything in terms of process and probably how we're going to organize. What
Hmm.
it doesn't change are the fundamentals of business. What are the fundamentals? Create value for customers with, a business model that resonates, and then implement that in a sound way. So you got to execute and run and manage the business. So those fundamentals don't change. Value for customers, value for your business, and how do you scale and run a business. How we're going to do that changes, but the fundamental principles don't change. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, because again, it changes everything and nothing, nothing in the foundational principles of a business,
I
but
see.
how we run it, how we're going to get there, how are we going to get towards creating value for customers? How are we actually going to run that business? Are we going to have a boss that's an AI agent? Could very well be. So the how will change, but the fundamentals of the what won't. Value for
Yeah.
customers, value for your business, and you got to run and manage that business. Those things don't change. How we're going to do it very likely will be influenced in a fundamental way by AI.
Yes, and speaking of how, right, you work with organizations that are really huge and one of the world's biggest, and then also with ventures that just starting out. In terms of AI and strategy innovation, where do you see companies and smaller ventures, like both of them, get it wrong?
So,
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
maybe not the wrong part to start with, but so one of the things that I'm thinking of, have to run a webinar on this kind of next week, is,
Yeah.
what's the disruption risk for established companies when it comes to AI? And surprisingly, some of the least, technology savvy companies will actually be least disrupted. So, if you're a food company, let's say you're
Hmm.
Nestle, Danone, whatever, and you have this global distribution network, retail into stores, into people's hands, guess what? That AI will not disrupt as easily. Supply chain for sure, how we come up with new products for sure. But today, I still believe, for the next couple of years, people will go to stores to buy food. Is there a fraction
Hmm.
that's gonna, get it delivered through AI? Well, it's very similar to the internet. So interestingly enough, for those aspects, food companies won't as easily be disrupted. Now, what will happen is they won't see as much growth because you're going to see a lot of small brands launching products insanely quickly.
Hmm.
So in food, in beauty products, all over those spaces, you're going to see small niche players get to a certain size. They won't disrupt completely and kill the large ones, but they will get to a size of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, which will eat into the growth of the large
Yeah.
players. Because what you can do faster than ever before is test and iterate a product and get it into people's hands. What you can do faster than ever before is, marketing tools with AI can allow an extremely small team do incredible stuff. So that will
Hmm.
get you very quickly to a certain size. That will impact large companies. It won't kill them. So it's in a
Hmm.
phenomenal time for, small companies, for startups, because you can do things you could never do before because AI is available to everybody. Gen AI, AI
Yeah.
is easily accessible, which it wasn't before. It's an old thing, 70 years old, but it's only a few years with kind of open AI making this popular that it's at our
Hmm.
fingertips. So that's going to change. Now, rambling quite a bit, but I'll get back to your question now, which is what are some people doing wrong? Is they're forgetting the fundamental principles and they put the technology at the center. So technology is just a means to an end. And can
Hmm.
AI help you do things you couldn't do before? You bet. But if you're,
Yeah.
let's say you're a large company you still need to have a leadership that embraces experimentation to test out new value propositions and business models. Otherwise, they will get killed by the corporate antibodies. So you still need to get those fundamentals right. How are you
Mm,
managing your company to allow the technology ideas or technology-based ideas to emerge? So I think the fundamentals is what people forget are still there.
yeah.
Or again, AI is super exciting. We can do all these things. Well, is it creating value for customers? And can that
Hmm.
business model scale? Or can it get
Yeah.
killed tomorrow by another competitor? So we forget that the fundamentals are still the things that you need to master. And that's what we put in our playbooks are the fundamentals. But then how do you use AI to do those fundamentals better? We just launched a playbook and pre-launched, if I may say, because I'm working on it now, is how do you use AI to craft better value propositions?
Hmm.
Doesn't, kill the fundamentals. You still need to
Yeah.
understand the customer. You still need to have a solution that resonates. And what AI helps you do is get there faster and end up with a better result. But the fundamental principles are the same. So
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
Speaking of fundamental principles in AI, a couple of things you made me think about. A, in terms of strategy, like the purpose of using AI in business is not to use more AI in business, but to do something else, right?
Yes.
Like create
Yes.
more value. And
Exactly.
yeah, so that's where I feel like the fundamentals that you're teaching with your work, whether that's business model or a value proposition, that's so important to like get them right before you put AI on top of that. And because,
Or
yeah,
I'd
go
frame it
ahead.
a little bit differently. It's not on top. It's like when you're trying out new stuff with AI, use the principles to do that right. So it's not on
Yeah,
top and getting the principles right first. It's using those principles to use
with
AI in the
AI.
best possible way. So again, like, am I, there's this new thing I could do with AI. I can do it faster. Is this really addressing a fundamental job that customers have? Is it
Hmm.
going to help them go faster, save money, whatever? So it's applying those principles to using AI. That's the way to probably frame it.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for this correction. I must admit, I'm not a business savvy person yet, but thanks to your tools, I'm hoping to become one sooner than
Oh,
later.
you will. You will. It's all about applying, practicing, iterating, and learning.
Uh, yes, that's what your work makes it look like. Like it's something that I can master and apply and get better at instead of again trying to just guess it. A couple of things that I wanted to touch upon, which, yeah, I don't hear quite often from anywhere else, but your work is this portfolio-based innovation in companies, meaning your approach and advice to companies to, to run this mini innovation experiments in different teams and then having a process to evaluate what's actually
Yeah.
working, right? Can you describe it more in detail, like how bigger companies can apply it at
Yeah.
scale?
So it's actually very simple, and I use this talking to senior leaders all the time. The company world is kind of split into two: running the business, which we call
Yeah.
exploit, and inventing the future, which we call explore. Now that is a spectrum. That's a continuum. So when you innovate within your core business, you're more on the exploit side. When you're trying out new business models, you're more on the explore side. So first, you need to understand exploit, explore. Now, when you're
Mhm.
running a business and let's say you're launching a new product, you still need to work in an iterative way, agile. So you're going to talk to customers, you're going to figure out, but since you're using the same channels, maybe the same supply chain, there's not that much risk and uncertainty. So you're probably going to get it right. So you think about it, you iterate, you make one bet to get one success. Now,
Mhm.
when we go into something that you don't know yet, new customer segments, new value propositions, new revenue streams, entirely new business model, new supply chain. You have no idea if it's going to work. So
Yeah.
there, thinking is not going to reduce the risk. And what happens is actually people apply in established companies, they apply the principles of exploit to explore. So they will think hard, they will analyze the
Mhm.
thing, they will make a market research kind of thing and a business plan, and then they'll invest. And then later on, the customers will say, well, we're not so interested. So generally they get some sales, but they won't get to where they needed to be. If you're Nestle, a $10 million product is not going to cut it. So in Explore, you create a portfolio of ideas, you get people started, you let teams start right away. Don't even try to ask yourself which idea is going to work because you don't know. So you let teams start, but then you give them a short amount of time to give you one thing, evidence that customers care. Do they have, don't ask them, oh, do you want this? Because they'll say, oh, what is this? I don't know if it's something new. But what you want to figure out is, do they have the problem that you're actually solving with your idea? Do they struggle with that things? Do they have a budget to pay for those things? And then after a couple of weeks, you look at the evidence. Is there something there? Yes, you continue. You give the team more money to go into the next phase. Nothing there, you kill the project. So you reduce the risk. So what companies that are really good at innovation do extremely well, like Amazon, they have thousands of projects running where people experiment. And then they kill the projects very quickly. So you create, portfolio is one, but you create this funnel where you have a lot of teams starting. After a few weeks, you kill maybe half or 70% of the projects. And then you do the same thing until the best ideas emerge. And that's what established companies, small and large, have a hard time is investing small in a lot of things and then killing a lot of things. So what happens is a lot of companies have big projects with no evidence, but they've spent so much that they have a hard time killing the project. So
Yeah,
many zombie projects out there that should be killed.
it's this, sunk cost fallacy that we have, which is fundamental human bias, cognitive bias.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
yes. And, speaking of this like smaller bets, I think where a lot of leaders have maybe troubles is they feel like everything is urgent and right now like in their core business and they can't really spread their focus, so to speak, or they just don't know how to spread their focus, like dedicate maybe partial time or resources. Do you have any advice or formula for navigating this question?
Well, yeah, the first thing, I think you're absolutely right, is I know some CEOs of extremely large and very successful companies who say, they don't say it publicly, but they will say in private, they don't know how exploration works
Yeah.
because nobody kind of made it simple to understand that running a company and innovating, how it's different. We all intuitively know it was different, but if you don't say exactly how, they're going to apply the rules of exploit to explore. So, first thing is, don't apply the rules of running a business to creating new businesses and innovation. So, number one, just understand that. Then, number two is curiosity. Okay, well, then, how does exploration work? Once you understand that as a leader, then you have to make a strategic choice. I tell everybody, you don't have to innovate. If you're growing like crazy and you don't think you're going to be disrupted, well, don't innovate. That's okay. But if you think that the world is changing and in 5 or 10 years it's fundamentally different, then you're probably better off investing in exploration. But again, it's not either or, it's often an and. Nothing, nothing, should get you away from focusing on running your business. You always need to put that first, otherwise you're going to die. You can't innovate yourself completely out of just the crisis. Kind of in most cases, sometimes it actually works. So then you make a strategic choice. Okay, no, all I want to do is get more out of my core. That's okay as a strategic choice. And then you innovate within the core because there's tons of exploration you can do within the core. But again, if you just do that and the world is changing, you might just die with a dying business model. So you have to make that strategic choice. And these days with AI, you really have to ask yourself, am I going to be disrupted? And a lot of companies, they will kind of admit, they will explore, but they won't pull through. Where most companies fail is that they don't invest in the scaling phase. So they'll try a lot of things, they'll see things that are working, but they won't invest in the scaling phase because there's basically three phases in every business. If you simplify it down, it's exploration, In a large company that might be from zero to a couple of $1 million. And then you have scaling, which is from a couple of $1 million to 50, 500, billion, whatever kind of the right size is. And then is running a business, whatever size. Again, so these are the three fundamental phases where most companies today are completely failing is not in the exploration. They do a little bit of that, not always, but many
Mm-hmm.
do. Where they fail is in the scaling. So what we really try to do is give those playbooks. How do you explore? That's a playbook. And now increasingly also we're looking at the playbook to scale because that's where we see a lot of companies failing. You got a couple of ideas that were proven in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now scale it. Because it's not
Yeah.
because it's proven that it's going to grow on its own. Because remember, established companies have corporate antibodies that kill anything that looks differently. So you need
Yeah.
to protect that business to scale it.
Uh, and well, a couple of questions here. Why do you think companies fail at this scale stage? Maybe, some fundamental reason that you
Simple,
noticed. Yeah, go
super
ahead.
simple. It's super simple. Like if you have a team of people running the divisions, well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to optimize their profit and loss to run the business. So that's what their job is. So you need to create explicit key performance indicators that
Mm-hmm.
help anything that looks differently to, survive and thrive.
Yeah.
I'll give you a silly example where even something that is a little bit different can easily die. So let's say you have a sales team and they're trimmed to sell, they get their bonuses based on quotas, etc. Then you give them a slightly different product. First thing is they have to learn how it works. The second thing, if it's a little bit different, they have to educate the customer, the client as well. So it's already more difficult. And maybe if the margins are slightly different or there's not as, a better bonus attached, they're not going to sell it. So this new thing, however customers might like it, could fall to the very bottom because it takes way too
Yeah.
much effort from the sales team to sell this new product. So what you need to do as a CEO then, or as a head of sales, is create the right incentives so that, the sales team will put some energy into selling those new products. So that could already kill the product. Now think of that. That's what I call corporate antibodies. If you have a different business model, well, it's in nobody's interest who's running the business because they say, gee, like I need to run my business, and now you're going to give me this
Yeah.
thing that's completely different. So if I'm selling, a consumable, and then you're trying to get me to sell a device, even if that would create recurring revenues, it's so different that you'd have to, weave things into the business model. So anything that looks different gets killed by most
Yeah.
corporations unless the leadership team proactively protects those new things and helps them thrive.
Yes. And what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm hearing wrong, incentives is the key. Like if you want people to prioritize a certain process, then you want it to be incentivized. Yeah.
Incentivized, or just put the right things in place. So for people, could also be organizational structures. So it might not be
Mm-hmm.
incentives. You might say, no, I'm going to create a sales team just for that new product. So that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to do with
Yeah.
incentives. You just
Yeah.
created, the right organizational structure to support that. So incentives is one. The other one is just create the right organizational structures to support that new thing, new product, new
Yeah.
business model, new channels. And that's where I think companies fall short is they think, oh, we created that thing, customers want it, that should sell on its own. Well, it's a bit different. The organizational structure might just kill it. And I think
Yeah.
that's where the awareness is missing. Over the summer, I did a workshop with the senior leadership team of a $40 billion company, and we looked at four adjacencies, and they had to map what's the synergy with the core business and what's the
Mm-hmm.
friction with the core business. And then based on that, they made a plan of how to resolve this. That's the kind of stuff you need to do if you want innovation to succeed.
Yeah, I feel like if you want anything to succeed, you need to do the same thing, right? You need to create the ecosystem to support the flourishing of this thing. Like, I don't know,
Yes.
if somebody wants to do fitness or healthy eating, like they need to buy stuff and they need to create time in their
Yes.
schedule and right,
Yes.
otherwise it won't work.
Yes.
So the same in companies. And yeah, and also, what I'm hearing from leaders that I'm working with, they often try to, like, for example, make people to adapt more to adopt more AI, and they create no sort of playground for that to happen, no
Yes.
time. And because everyone is busy already, they're like, why
Feel.
would I spend more
Yes.
time? Yes,
Yes.
the exploring
So
this thing.
I think what you hit the nail on the head, because I like the fitness analogy actually, in the sense that the excitement alone is not going to get you very far. It's the discipline, the repetitiveness, and the structures you put in place. So if you have a peer group that's going to go work out with you or go run with you, and you have it in your schedule, it's like silly stuff that kind of sounds boring, but the same goes with innovation. If you don't, systematically weave it in, create the support structures, create the discipline, it will not happen. The sheer willpower, like we know it from, like I can say, I get excited at the beginning of the year. I'm going to go
Yeah.
work out every day. I'm going to have a six pack, at the end of February. And then I realize, well, okay, willpower might not be enough because I have a pretty busy life. But when you put the structures in place, the incentives, etc., then it becomes a bit more seamless. It's never easy, but
Yeah.
without, relying on willpower. And that's, when what I don't like today in companies, a lot of leaders, they say everybody needs to be an innovator and then gets people excited, but the structures haven't changed. So you'll get a spark, you might get one
Yeah.
or two things, but you definitely won't be able to change it systematically. So fitness is a very good analogy there. It's not enough to be motivated and to want.
Yeah.
You need the right structures and programs and
Yeah.
playbooks, right?
Exactly, the right systems in place. I have this, saying that I put on my LinkedIn even. Knowledge without engagement won't stick. Engagement without system won't last. And what it means
Absolutely.
is you might have like the most creative, innovative people, but
Yes.
there is
Yes.
no system to support
Yes.
their efforts. It's gonna
And
die.
here you say something really interesting. So, I had this debate a couple of times where somebody told me, oh, it's all about people. And that's true. But how many companies do you know that, ran great people into the ground? And a good
Yeah.
example that with the same people, but with a different strategy and different system, you can actually have different results is Microsoft. So Steve Ballmer was a world-class executor with
Hmm.
the team of people he had. He grew the business over years, but he missed out on every single innovation. Why? Because the focus was Windows and Microsoft Office, and that was it, right? Like, so the system
Yeah.
was built for that. They had probably one of the world's best research labs, but nothing came out of that because everything was killed. Then at the end, and to the credit of Steve Ballmer, like he put, Satya Nadella in place. Then you have Satya who comes in with basically not all the same people, but a lot of the same people, if you take the size of the company, and turns the company around. And that was not by firing people and putting everybody else in place, but different strategy with different organizational structures. And in their case, even a different mindset. So it's actually
Yeah.
pretty cool to read Satya's biography. He
Refresh. Yeah, I
talks
love it.
about like mindset. So that's a great example that the same people with the wrong structure, it won't work. And that's the same for innovation. I don't believe any company has a people problem. If you have more than 1,000 people, you have innovative people. In smaller
Yeah.
companies, you could debate. But when you have 1,000 people, you have enough people who know what should be done. You give them the space and structure, the system to execute the right innovation playbooks.
Yes, and speaking of mindsets that you mentioned, what I also learned in my work is very often leaders think I need to change people's minds. And what I learned to believe, just change the systems, people's minds will change accordingly,
Often,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
often, often. Or you will enable the people who already have that mindset shift. So the other thing that, I'll give you an anecdote. So I was doing a dinner with a leadership team of a company with around 10,000 people. And their CEO at the end, I was just kind of educating the leadership team on innovation and growth. And then at the end, the CEO says, oh, Alex, I get it. I get it. I need to infect everybody with the innovation virus. I said, well, they, not really. So it was just in my head, I was like, what did I do wrong? Then I told them, what you really want is to create a transparent system where innovators can innovate. Not everybody has to be an innovator. Some
Yeah.
people are world class at execution and running the company. Do you want to help them understand what innovation is about so they can support it? Yes. Do you want them to become innovators? Probably not. You want them to run the
Yeah.
company. But what you want is a place where innovators can go. And I'm not speaking physical place. We waste way too much money on innovation buildings, it's sticky notes on the wall. No, a process space, a cultural space where
Hmm.
innovators can innovate. So I think it's often more about unlocking what's in
Yeah.
people. And yes, sometimes you have to change mindsets, of course. Like the culture has to change. But you don't need to change everybody, and not everybody needs to become an innovator. So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot there around systems and culture that can be done that doesn't necessarily require changing everybody's minds and turning everybody into an innovator, because then nobody runs the company anymore. That's a disaster.
Yes. So, which is a different strokes for different folks. But what I mean is like we have every company has in in terms of people like different tools to
Yes.
work on different priorities. And so some people are better, at solving certain problems and maybe they should just do that.
Yes,
And
exactly, exactly. And then
yeah,
at the
and
end, you build multidisciplinary teams, right? So people who are creative are one aspect of innovation. That's the easiest one. You do need people who, can help us stick to a process. So you need a
mhm,
multidisciplinary team with different kinds of skills, and some will be closer to execution and scaling, and some will
yeah,
be closer to, I'm good with ambiguity. I can talk to customers. I can try to figure out, I can see
yeah.
patterns. So it's all about these mixed teams.
Yes. Again, to sum it up, what I'm hearing is everything the company needs to be doing, it has to have a place, time, resources, and a process and a structure, like whether that's innovation or
You
maintaining
bet.
your core
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
Another aspect of innovation, of structured innovation and business strategy I'd like to touch upon is I feel like what we were talking about just now was mostly about mature companies, right? Established companies. And how about startups or ventures that just starting out, right? Usually they are more innovative, like almost entirely they just innovating, trying things out, trying to figure out how it all works. Where do you see, having worked with them as well, they get it wrong or make mistakes or the process of innovation could be improved? And also
Yeah.
just developing their business.
Yeah, I think it's very similar playbooks in the sense that, there's a playbook to figure out what customers, what are their jobs, pains, and gains. There's a playbook to figure out which value propositions resonate with them. Those are the same in established companies and a startup. Now, what is going to be different is where you get the resources from. I actually, think startups are way more focused on the right thing, because if you don't find customers who are willing to pay, you're going to die. You're going to run out
Yeah,
of money
sooner.
sooner or later, right? Now, there was a time where there was a little bit too much free money around. Maybe it might be the case in AI these days still. But if you run out of money, you're over. And in companies, I remember one senior executive told me that, you know what, at our company, it's actually very hard to get resources, but once you have them, it's very hard to not get them anymore. So some of those projects will go on while you have no evidence, no customers, nobody
Yeah.
paying. Again, because maybe we want to avoid failure. So the playbooks are the same. The system is a little bit different. I think what I still see a lot of startups get wrong is technology focus. So they get overly into, we need to make a prototype of the technology that works, because only if we have a technology prototype can we actually test things. That's absolutely
Yeah.
wrong. The first thing you want to do, I talked to an entrepreneur earlier this week. First thing I said is, have you really deeply understood the customer before
Hmm.
you're investing in technology? Down to, the ranking of the jobs, pains, and gains. There's a
Hmm.
ton more. In that case, that entrepreneur has actually done a lot of things right, but hasn't gone far enough in deeply understanding jobs, pains, and gains. And then even when you start with technology, it's iterative. You figure out what customers want. You try the technology. Oh, that's going to take me a year. You go back to customers. So it's iterative. It's not sequential. So
Yeah.
biggest mistake, entrepreneurs, they focus on technology and product too much, too early.
Hmm.
And then the
Hmm.
second one is they see it as sequential. First market research, then product, then scaling. No, it's iterative.
Yes.
You'll go forward, you'll learn, you'll go backwards, you'll fail a ton. So I
Yeah.
think this iterative process is crucial. And then listening to customers. Companies are not good
All
enough,
the time.
including Strategyzer. We had some periods where we just believed too much in our vision and
Mhm.
didn't really kind of test it rigorously enough. And sometimes we tested it enough and we still kind of went in the wrong direction. It's not easy, right? So
Yeah. A couple of things that reminded me of a client of mine, an entrepreneur, they're in this like product figuring out or creating the best version of their product phase, right? And he was saying, oh, we just want to figure out the product first to make the best thing out there, and right, and then work on the rest of the stuff, like long-term
that's the
strategies.
best way to run out of money. That's
Uh,
absolutely the best way to run out of money. So, don't go for the best version. Get people to adopt something and then you improve from there. And
yeah,
obviously not possible everywhere, right? When you're making medicine and you're making new
yeah,
drugs for in pharma, you can't go with a small thing. But another thing is, so sometimes I remember working with a big credit card transaction company, and they said, Alex, we can't do prototypes because our transaction systems need to work. And they cost millions and millions of dollars, even a prototype. I said, well,
mhm,
one reason more to rigorously figure out what the jobs, pains, and gains of people are before you invest in expensive prototypes. So there's so much that can be done. People build too quickly. And I
yeah,
kind of fear that AI is gonna accelerate the build too quickly. Sometimes
yeah,
it's good to build faster because you make it concrete and people can see it. But often going down a completely wrong road when you build something, yeah, you won't understand what customers really need. So I do think there's a huge space still for going deep, deep, deep on customer jobs, pains, and gains. And AI can help
yeah.
with that as well.
Yes. And it's also, sometimes tricky because also like sometimes people say one thing and then you test it and it
It's
doesn't work.
always, it's not sometimes. So this is
Yeah.
another kind of thing that, first time entrepreneurs, they think, oh, I'm following this playbook. And then the lights are going to go on left and right, and the path is going to be super clear. It's never clear. In entrepreneurship and innovation, you always have contradicting evidence. The key is, and that's what the best entrepreneurs do, they do see patterns in this mess of data. And that's where
Yeah.
I do believe AI will be able to help. Like we try to use more of that in pattern recognition. It's
Hmm.
something humans are not really good at, entrepreneurs better than others. And I don't think AI will be able to do that for everything. But the kind of detecting patterns in the mess is something that you need to just remind yourself. It's very rare that you'll have that very clear path. One out of a million startups is going to be like that, become the next unicorn. Fine. OpenAI was able to do that with
Yeah.
when they launched their first kind of public, mass market chat. But that's so rare. So, people think of that, it won't happen. In 99% of cases, you'll have contradicting evidence, but you'll get closer. So the light gets stronger the further you go down the right path. What can happen
Yeah.
sometimes is you think you're on the right path. I remember us doing that with our first programs. The light got stronger and then it went black. So then you have to go all the way back and find a different
Yeah.
path and see if that's the
Mm.
right path. The light gets stronger the closer you get to the right path, but there's always contradicting evidence.
Yeah. And also, things change all the time now, faster than ever. And speaking of that, I actually wanted to ask, how do you suggest companies stay more adaptable and also mm, listen better, I guess, in this era where things really like shift and change fast. What I hear
Yeah.
often from
Yeah.
leaders and entrepreneurs are like, well, we didn't know what to do anymore because we roll one thing out and in a
Yes.
week something
Yes.
changes. And
Yes.
so what do we do now? Like, yeah, go ahead.
That's the challenge, right? So you need to exploit and explore at the same time. So
Hmm.
innovation is not a stunt. That's what sometimes people, might still think in entrepreneurship or smaller companies. I find a product and then, like I relax. The reality
Yeah.
is it changes all the time. So we have to get comfortable with the fact that while we're running and executing, and we can't neglect that again, like you have to run that piece. Even if you're small, you're going to have to figure out how can you explore at the same time. And I think, the way to look at it is innovation doesn't necessarily require an R&D team and new
Mm-hmm.
technology that is expensive. You today, I think with AI, you can create really amazing things based on off the shelf, software that's out there. They give you access. So you need to get comfortable with exploring and you need to get comfortable with cheap exploring while you're running a business. It's not easy. I'm speaking knowing that we're a small company and we explore and exploit at the same time. It's costly. But if you don't, you'll get stuck in your existing business model, which might die. So it's a
Yeah.
strategic choice, but I think it's going to get harder and harder to only exploit. It's with
Yeah.
the fundamental and rapid changes that are going on. I think, as a CEO, I try to experiment with AI, trying all these things out helps you understand how to maybe embrace them a bit more.
Yes. And I also feel like your work is more relevant than ever. And also in this like iterative fashion, meaning you don't just discover, value proposition once. You don't just figure out your
Yes.
business model once.
Yes.
You learn how to go through this process and hopefully you put it into
Yeah.
some sort of automated system or process and you run it again and again
Yes.
and again.
Yes. And I think that what I would emphasize is ask yourself, what are the principles that don't change? You know
Yeah.
what made Amazon successful is they always followed a couple of principles, and one of the principles were, that they focused on is people want to pay less. So that's never going to
Hmm.
change. It's probably really rare, unless you become a millionaire or billionaire, you want to pay less. That's
Yeah.
really their core audience and has always been. That was a principle they said is not going to change. So with all the change happening, some things will not change. And one is customers, jobs, pains, and gains. You need to
Yeah.
satisfy those. So you're going to have to listen. I think we're too much focused on technology. Why don't we focus more on what our customers really trying to get done? And then the solution becomes a bit more obvious. So there are fundamentals that don't change. And I think there are a couple of those in every industry. So it's very important to try to figure out what doesn't change within this sea of rapid change.
Yes. And, speaking of Amazon and what doesn't change or changes slower, Amazon, for example, they lean into one of the ideas is things delivered faster. And it plays into this fundamental sort of human need to get the rewards faster, right? The faster we get something, the happier we are. And
Yeah.
that thing that is hardwired in our brain will
Instant
probably,
gratification.
yeah, exactly, will
Absolutely.
probably
Yeah.
not change
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
like ever, or at least for a very
Yeah.
long time.
Well, I'll give you an example of where we got it wrong, actually twice. So first at the beginning, I was troubled. I thought strategy is important, right? Strategy is important
Yeah.
for companies. Well, yeah, but there's no instant gratification. So turns out strategy is so long term that people actually don't care that much on a daily basis because you know what? They're, 100 emails they got
Yeah.
while being at a workshop concerns them more than the outcome of the workshop. Of course, I'm, a bit black and white here. But so with the same thing with innovation, what I realized actually not too long ago is innovation is a very difficult space because it will pay off in a couple of years. And then for most CEOs, they won't even be CEO anymore, so they don't care. So that instant gratification thing is, and then the recurring challenge is one thing you want to focus on. What are people struggling with every day? It doesn't need to be a huge pain. Again, like all the emails you get, that's a constant pain. Is that your biggest pain in life? Probably not, but it's always there. So those are the things, that hit you. So I think there's some
Yeah.
of those where instant gratification will pay off much faster than the big thing where you think you're creating value, but actually, it doesn't.
Yeah. I think like as you said, the most difficult about think about innovation is that it doesn't have this instant gratification in most cases. And
Exactly.
the worst of all, it might not even work the way you think it
Exactly, exactly. There's no
might.
guarantee. So, and
And
that was when I realized I actually always said innovation is a hard space, and when I realized, well, why are we in a market that's so hard? It's arrogance almost saying we can make it work. It's a shitty market, but we can make it work. That's very arrogant. Why not pivot to an easier market and make it work there?
Mhm.
So there was a moment, and I call this the expansion pivot. We still do innovation, of course, because we believe in it, and there are companies who want to do it. But it's so hard as a market that if you rely on innovation, you're dead. So we went
Yeah.
beyond and we look at strategy, go to market, and that's everywhere where our tools help. And that was a big insight, thinking like, why are we
Mhm.
staying in the difficult market? That's a pretty arrogant move.
Yes. So do you kind of want to have this portfolio mindset as well? It's what I'm hearing,
Exactly,
right?
exactly, exactly.
So you don't do all the most difficult things that might not work out. So speaking of, maybe vision and the future for strategizers, especially for your work, what are you most excited about, and where do you see
Yeah.
your company vision going on moving forward?
Well, what I'm most excited about is this expansion pivot towards themes that are very relevant to very large group of people. So go to market. And we just had one client
Mm,
telling us, I think it was last week, you helped us go from 12 months to 12 weeks. Wow. So we're helping them launch stuff a lot faster. It's the same tools that you use in innovation. Or we're launching and this brings me kind of to the second topic that I'm super excited about are our playbooks. So I'm working now personally on a playbook on, aligning product sales and marketing so that, they don't work into different directions. Or the
yeah.
playbook that got most traction actually that we're launching, and we got some pre-sales, you can buy it already at a discount, but we're launching it probably end of September where we focus on creating or crafting great value propositions with Gen AI. So again, it's the same tools that you apply in innovation, but it's in a
Yeah.
core execution space. How do I formulate my value proposition? And rather than just doing another prompt engineering, I can
Hmm.
do these prompts to come up with a great value proposition. It actually goes deeper. How do I use AI to better understand customers? Once I understand
Mm.
customers, how do I use AI to test my value proposition? And then you get to the crafting of. So these playbooks are definitely the one I'm super excited about. And with the playbooks on our platform, we also make this a lot more accessible. So what we do in large companies, so last week I run a wonderful workshop with the senior executives of a division of a large company. Now, that is not accessible to most people because I'm pretty expensive, but the playbook is the same. So, what we're doing is we're making these playbooks accessible to anybody on the planet by putting them onto
Mm.
our platform. So, I'm super excited about, years ago said we want to democratize these tools, get them into hands of millions of people,
Mm.
which we did with the business model canvas, the value proposition canvas. But as you said at the beginning, so now we're at the end, right, of our conversation the what you said is it's about the process of putting this in place. And that's what we do with playbooks. We show people how to do it and do it. So it's not about the learning, it's not about the process per se, it's about the outcome. We help them achieve
Yeah.
outcomes with the playbook. Super exciting. And we're doing that hopefully for millions of people in the future to use our
Hmm.
tools, but we want to give them
Yeah.
playbooks and get them to apply those playbooks.
Yeah, it's I'm also excited about the, this like vision of all the playbooks. I'm such a fan of playbooks. I'm like this is the only way to do anything in life. Theory is very limited in real life. Like knowledge,
Yes.
is almost nothing without
Yes.
the implementation and having
Yeah.
the process to do that. So yeah, very excited about that. You know what it made me think of? I don't know if it's applicable or not, but like this subscription model where people
Yeah.
can just, constantly evolve with your company. So just something
Oh,
I
that's
thought
that's
about.
coming. Yeah, yeah, that's what we shifted towards already today. These are subscriptions. You can buy today. We haven't figured out the pricing for libraries, so you get a
Yeah.
subscription to everything yet. But today we have a couple of people who already buy subscription to everything, more in the enterprise space. We're going to make that
Yeah,
accessible also in the other space
that's
because we
amazing.
continue to learn and share. So you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. We're doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, so cool. Excited to see that coming live. Also, as someone into visionary stuff and strategy for the future, I always ask my guests, like, what success looks like for you for Strategyzer in, let's say, 10 years, right? Your wildest dreams and things you want to work out came true. What would it look like?
So, so, shifting completely from a transactional revenue model to a recurring revenue model is something we haven't fully pulled off yet. And that's what I'm excited about, number one. And then number two, can we get the playbooks into as many hands as
Mm.
possible from the largest companies that we're already serving with our consulting business all the way to, new startups across the planet. So that's
Yeah.
most exciting, getting those playbooks into hands of people. What we're already starting is allowing others to put their playbooks onto our platform. So we're working with a big financial institution for their innovation teams, for their clients to put
Mhm.
playbooks onto our platform. So that's the next level of scaling where we get
Yeah,
others to democratize their knowledge on our platform. So those are the things I get excited about.
that's amazing. Yeah, it's I guess sector by sector, so applicable to different industries
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
scenarios.
So
I'm
so look, I'm looking forward to the first HR playbooks, human
amazing.
resources playbooks. They're
Yeah.
not going to come from us. We're not the specialists,
Yeah.
but I want to be able to, acquire maybe a Mercer or so, not as a company, but as a client to put their playbooks onto our platform. I think too few consultancies yet think playbook. They either educate or they consult, but they don't
Yeah.
enable others with playbooks. So playbooks are, sheer enablement. So that's what I believe in. I actually, hope that this is going to disrupt a lot of consultancies because the playbooks allow people to do it on their own.
Yeah, that's what I'm also passionate about. When I teach my stuff and concept, I'm like, how can I make myself obsolete by giving people tools to
Exactly.
do it on their own?
That's the
Um,
ultimate success, right? So the way I see it is I've succeeded personally when I'm irrelevant, completely irrelevant.
yeah.
Maybe I already am and I'm just delusional. But when Strategyzer doesn't need me per se and the world doesn't need my thinking or our thinking. So that's what we're trying to move towards. When we go into a company today, we already work towards, the Independence Day, if you want. We say,
Yeah.
yeah, we can coach you, but we want you to become autonomous. Here are the playbooks on our platform. And with those playbooks, they become autonomous. So we
Yeah.
self-disrupt to a certain extent. And with the playbooks, we're disrupting our consulting business. Absolutely fine, because that's the shift I want to make.
Yes. And here a couple of thoughts occur to me is that A, when you disrupt yourself and make yourself obsolete in one thing, it means that you can now grow into something else
Yes,
and not being stuck in that older thing that you have to do over and over and
exactly.
over again. Yeah. And I think for
Exactly.
creative person, it's such a actually joy to like, okay, I created this, it's useful, now I can do something else.
Yes,
And
exactly. Exactly.
and the same, for my coaching clients, I thought to myself, like, when I work with someone, my ideal outcome is for them to go through this process, build the skills, and never come back to me for that thing ever again.
There you go. Exactly. That's what we're
And
trying to do.
yes, and
Wonderful.
speaking of ideas and creativity, I think one of the last questions I wanted to ask, where do you where is your source maybe of your creative ideas and new things that you come up with? Do you have any hobbies? I don't know, music, sports, something else you're passionate about? Um,
So the source of creativity comes from, watching clients struggling with certain things. Now, where I kind of get to think about those things is, where I go to do my thinking and reflection is just in beautiful natural places. I love the
mhm.
mountains, so I tend to hang out in the mountains, summer and winter. I really like that. Long hikes, crazy hikes or crazy
Yeah.
ski tours, that's where I get, the inspiration per se. The seeds come from the curiosity watching people
Yeah.
with business challenges, where they kind of mature is in the mountains. So when we worked on some of these books that you can see behind me,
Yeah.
with Eve, we went, to a couple of retreats, in particular for the Invincible company. We probably did about 15 retreats to, and 12 were to the mountains. So the mountains are definitely a space where my thinking matures.
Yeah, and I just wanted to actually ask you this question because what I also believe a lot of leaders in companies get like this part of innovation or creativity a little bit wrong in terms of they also try to run it on a deadline or in some sort of sprint, which doesn't always allow for the thinking space, the space where you just process stuff without having to come up with the result right away, right?
Yeah.
Well, at
I,
least, yeah, go ahead.
hesitating, like in the sense that
Yeah.
I like deadlines, but it's not that you can't have guaranteed results. So you can't say, oh, show me, I need that customer evidence next Friday. What you
Yeah.
say is, well, show me the what you've learned until next Friday, and then they'll have evidence or not. So I believe in tight deadlines and then killing
Yeah.
projects or not. So I actually believe in that. And one of the things I say when it comes to innovation is any head of innovation, chief of strategy or growth officer that's tasked with innovation, if they can't show return on investment, they should get fired. So at the end
Hmm.
of the day, you need to produce results. So I think holding innovators accountable is extremely important. Holding them to deadlines extremely important, but in a different way than an exploit. So where I join
Hmm.
you, and that's probably where this is where what you mean is deadlines in the exploit sense, absolutely not. But deadlines, in exploration, you got to run 3 experiments the next 2 weeks. That's a deadline.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
what's going to come out of those, we don't know. So I am a big fan of deadlines and return on investment, but in a very different way than in the exploit part of the business.
Yeah, I think what I also meant more on a personal level for leaders to emphasize to people that people do need this time, like your time in the mountains, or people doing their hobbies for their brain to process stuff, not just,
Yeah.
doing the work all the time.
100%. 100%. I think what kind of workspace do you want to create? But I also don't believe in dogma. I think people will
Hmm.
go to the companies that correspond most to the culture they're looking for. So
Yeah.
some people don't want that. They do want to sleep at the office, beside Elon Musk in the supply chain.
Yeah.
Well, don't be my guest, be his guest. So some people want that, and that's okay. So I think we shouldn't
Yeah.
generalize. I think what we should do as leaders is make the culture of our company explicit and attract people who correspond to that culture.
Hmm.
So I think that's key. Not everybody, at Yvonne Choya with Patagonia and said, "Let my people go surfing." That's not everybody's thing. But at that
Yeah.
company, that was definitely a thing. And that company is organized differently. That's not everybody's piece of cake. So I'm not into dogma in this case at all.
Hmm.
I think we need to create a transparent culture and then invite the people with the right culture to come to those companies.
Yeah. And also everyone probably should know how they work the best, in
Exactly.
terms of,
That's
yeah.
it. Not everybody does, right? So you need to
Yeah.
know the culture you want and then join a company that has that kind of culture. I think that's a big theme for the next couple of years. And I think a lot of people are maybe questioning themselves and what they're doing because they haven't listened enough to themselves and they're at a workplace where the culture doesn't correspond to their way of working, their beliefs.
Yeah.
So, and not everybody has the luxury to do that. So let's be
Yeah.
honest, like we're pretty, lucky,
Lucky.
or we made a choice to be in that situation. And sometimes that comes with certain downsides. Being an entrepreneur, it's a lot of fun stuff, but man, it's a roller coaster, right?
Yes. On that note of knowing yourself and doing the right company to do your great work and innovate into the future, I'd like to sum up our episode. And the last question is, well, maybe a couple of more questions. One question is there a question that I didn't ask you, but you wished I did, so you could share some value or insight with our listeners?
There's maybe two. One is, what is success for a company and what is
Yeah.
success for me as an entrepreneur. I think the first one, companies in general, they need to make explicit what success looks like, but I think increasingly companies should look at success for their team members, their employees, and society
Mm,
as well, not because it's the right, just because it's the right thing to do, but because that's how you're going to attract some of the best talent. And then,
yeah.
I invite everybody to ask themselves, what does success look like for them? So it might
Mm-hmm.
be, oh, like I just want the big wallet or be on the cover of a magazine. That's okay. No value judgment. For me, that's not the case. And maybe there were years where that was more the case. Figure out, what does success mean for you? For me, the big thing is to continue the relationship with my kids. So I just hired my son into Strategyzer
Uh,
because it's one thing that allows me to spend more time with him. And obviously, like, if he doesn't like it, well, I tried, but so far, so good. So that's part of what I define as success, the relationship that I can have with my children. So, I think we just need to define what matters to us, not to others, or what often is characterized as success. Right? So I
uh,
listened to this anecdote. Now I'll stop there, and I think we come to a good end. I don't remember who said that, but I was watching I think it was a podcast by Stephen Bartlett, and one of the participants was saying, oh, it was actually I remember it was Trevor Noah. He was saying,
yeah, from South
why? Yeah,
Africa.
the comedian, and he was saying, with Swiss roots, I may say,
Yeah.
he was saying, why do we read about these super successful musicians or Hollywood stars that die alone in their bathtub? Like, and in all places, why alone in their bathtub? And everybody, or like, I mean, I'd say everybody, but it sounds like that's the success. They're famous, they're rich. And then there's a stereotype of, yeah, and then they die in their bathtub. But think of it, they don't die on the dance floor. We don't read that a lot. So I think, defining what success is for you and then living up to that standard, to your own
Yeah.
personal standard of success. That's the only thing that matters. Don't define your success by the external world, because you'll never get there. There's always the next thing. But when you're
Yeah.
at peace with what success is for you, then I think it's a bit easier. Anyway, a lot of blah blah, but it's
Yeah.
been a topic that I've been kind of thinking of for the last couple of
Well,
days.
I just would like to add to that. I wrote a short blog just a couple of days ago, and the title was Every Success Metric is Wrong Except One. And the one was the one that you create for yourself.
Yes, love it. Awesome. Great framing. Great framing.
Yes, and that's so like I didn't know we would go there, but that is so important. I believe
Wonderful.
whether you lead company or you lead yourself or in building your life, it's so important to understand like what's your exit strategy in terms of
What
like
drives you? Yeah,
what success is for you and then optimize your life work company for that. So thank you
exactly.
for that note at the end. And Alex, we could be talking about everything for strategy, innovation, and also your books for kids on strategy and business for like another couple of hours. You are so generous in terms of your work, and everything that you produce. But yeah, we have time limit. So where should listeners go to explore more of your work, to learn about Strategyzer, about Alex? Yeah, where would you send our listeners?
Just go to strategyzer.com. You'll find a lot on our playbooks. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Alex Osterwalder, and I always write about my latest thoughts and the stuff that we do at
Mhm.
Strategyzer. So those are the two places where you'll always get the fresh stuff that we're working on.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we're gonna link that in the show notes. And maybe if people were to pick up, let's say business people were to pick up one of the books or I don't know, courses, like what would that be? Where would
Go
you
to
like
our
people to
website.
start?
Yeah, go
Mhm.
to our website and pick the playbook of your choice.
Okay.
I think that's where I would send people. Is we're launching a couple of really wonderful playbooks based on everything we've learned in the field, packaging them so that people get outcomes. There's no time to learn, but there's a time to get stuff done.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So listeners, please do go to the website that is linked in the show notes and follow Alex's work on LinkedIn as well. And Alex, thank you so much for being such an amazing guest and for all your work. Yeah, thank you so much. Feeling
Thanks
incredibly
for having me.
grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Wonderful
having you.
conversation. Thanks for
Wonderful. Thank you.